Perfect. All right. Well, seeing as it's now 10 o'clock, wanting to keep the meeting moving since we have a full agenda and it looks like there's about 20 other people. We'll get going here. A couple, as part of my call to order, in this new era, since this is the first Freight Committee meeting that we've had in some time since the COVID began. I have to go through a few additional steps. The first is, as permitted by the Governor's Disaster Declaration of August 21st, 2020, the determination has been made that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent for this committee to meet in person. To ensure a transparent and open meeting as possible, we posted the meeting materials approximately 1 week in advance. We'll provide a recording of this meeting linked on our website. We'll take all votes by roll call. As a few reminders, please remain muted when not speaking. You can unmute yourself if you want to contribute to the conversation. Keep your video on if you're comfortable doing so, but if you're not, that's fine. You can also use the chat feature for any questions or comments you may have. Ryan Tomto, our new committee liaison with CMAP, will be monitoring the chat log. Will let us know if someone enters something there to be during our discussion. Please be aware this meeting, including all messages in the chat boxes, will be recorded in compliance with the Illinois Open Meetings Act. And for our guests and general public, thank you very much for joining. We do ask that you remain muted until the public comment section at the end of the meeting. With that, a few additional preliminary announcements I wanted to make. My co-chair, Eric, is not able to join us, Gallion, because he announced actually last evening that he and his wife had a baby this weekend, and so they're getting discharged from the hospital as we go. Mom and baby are great, but he won't be joining us, and I do have a hard stop that I have to drop off at 11:30 Central, and Ryan, if the meeting continues beyond that, will take over from me from there. So with that, Ryan, did you have anything for the agenda changes?
No, there's no changes to the agenda.
Okay, great. All right. The next, I'll give everybody a minute to review the February 24th meeting minutes, and we'll use this. We're going to do our approval of minutes through a roll call vote. We'll use this roll call vote to approve the minutes and to also confirm attendance, which will save us some time. Committee members do not need to abstain from approving minutes from a previous meeting that you did not attend. I'll look for a motion from someone for approval of the minutes in a second.
Motion for approval. Mike Burton.
Mike, okay.
Second, Elaine Bottomley.
Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Actually, you could do this by roll call.
Alrighty. Well, welcome everyone.
Oh, go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry. Yeah, we're not in person. So go ahead. One by one.
Yeah, I'm just going to go through and do a roll call so that we can get attendance and then approve the minutes as well.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm just going to go in alphabetical order, starting with Joe Alonzo from CDOT.
Aye.
Elaine Bottomley from Council of Mayors.
Aye.
Mike Burton, C&K Trucking.
Aye.
Colin Dusing from Will County. Colin, are you there? Nope. Okay. We know that Eric is out. Reggie Greenwood from SSMMA. Clayton Harris from Illinois International Port District.
Individual rules. A little background on Ray.
Dr. J. Lee Hutchins, Jr. And then I think we have Clark Carricker from the Illinois Chamber here.
Yes, aye.
Okay, great. Kazuya Kawamura from UIC. Okay. Michael Kowalczyk from FHWA.
Aye.
Amy Lee. John Loper from DuPage, DOT.
Aye.
Libby Ogard.
Here.
And I assume that's to approve the minutes too.
Sure.
Okay. Deanna Smith from IDOT. And Herbert Smith.
Yep, approved.
Sam Wright from Cook County.
Aye.
And Eric Varela from Railroad. Great. Okay. I think that's everybody.
Perfect. All right. Ryan, why don't you take the opportunity then, since this is your first committee meeting, to introduce yourself, your background, and welcome, by the way.
Thank you. My name is Ryan Tomto. I'm a new senior policy analyst here at CMAP. As I think most of you know, Jeff Schnobrook moved on to Minnesota for a great job opportunity there. And so I've been hired to take over many of the roles that he had previously worked on. I know that he greatly enjoyed working with this committee, and I'm really looking forward to taking on that responsibility, or serving as liaison to the committee. So I'm originally from the Midwest, but I have professional experience. I actually just recently moved from Seattle. I was a senior transportation analyst there at the Puget Sound Regional Council, which is the MPO for the Seattle area. I also have transportation planning and policy analyst experience for other regional planning agencies in Northern California, as well as in Madison, Wisconsin. So overall, if I haven't had an introduction meeting with you yet, please expect that an invitation will be coming soon. And other than that, I'm just really excited to be here, and I look forward to working with this group. And if anybody has any questions or comments or need any assistance at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
One additional housekeeping item, and welcome again, Ryan, that I'm curious for our purposes going forward. Has Aaron discussed the transition over to the old post office? Has that changed with the timeline for the transition? And when currently is guidance from CMAP for when you staff will be going back to the office?
So the transition has occurred. So we are officially out of Willis Tower, and the offices are now in the old post office. We're still working remotely. And right now it's into the indefinite future. We don't have an exact date when we'll be returning yet. But that is something, as soon as I have more information, I'll be sure to share that with the committee.
That'll be great, and we'll definitely want to share with this committee to just remind everyone that you're not in the old building whenever things do resume to normal and we are meeting face to face. But that's very exciting, and thanks for that update. Now we'll turn it over on our meeting agenda for Dustin to present the Illinois International Port District Master Plan update. Dustin, take it away.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for letting me join you this morning. My name is Dustin Cagliari. I'm an associate planner with CMAP, and the project manager on the IPD master plan. And I'm happy to be giving you all an update here this morning. We go next slide. So just gonna walk you through what we're gonna be talking about. I'll give a brief overview of the project, talk through our phase 1 findings so far, give an overview of a high-level overview of potential uses that we're looking at support for the master plan, specifically in regards to freight, and then next steps for the project. So the IIPD, as I'm sure most of you already know, is 1,800 acres on the southeast side of the city, including 2 properties, Lake Calumet and Iroquois Landing, connected by the Calumet River. So the port provides a multimodal connection to manufacturers and industry in the Chicago region and markets reachable by the waterway system. Primary uses include freight and industry, but the district also includes non-freight uses such as Harborside Golf Center, passenger cruises, wildlife habitat, and multiple undeveloped parcels that could have a variety of uses. The port has 20 primary tenants, the largest of which are NASCO out on Iroquois Landing, which uses the property for open air storage of goods like lumber and steel, and Kinder Morgan, an oil and gas transporter. Next slide. So CMAP has been working with the Port District since the 2017 Local Technical Assistance Call for Projects. Working with the Port District, we completed a planning priorities report in 2018 and 2019. And one of the recommendations coming out of that was to pursue a master planning process. So the master plan is funded through IDOT, through the SPR program, with project oversight from IDNR. And so a deep consulting team with expertise in port planning, market analysis, and outreach has been leading the planning process hand in hand with us and along with Clayton and his team at the port. Next slide. So the planning process is roughly broken up into 2 phases. Phase 1 is focused heavily on research to get a full understanding of what's happening at the Port District, comparing it to peers in the marketplace, and past and ongoing community planning efforts. So this phase included 3 deliverables, an existing conditions report, a market assessment, and a peer ports comparison, 2 of which are available on our project website, and the 3rd is to be available very soon. Phase 2, which is what we're entering into now, will develop potential futures for the port through scenario planning based on phase 1 research, input and feedback, and stakeholder conversations. Additionally, we'll be identifying key recreational, community, and environmental initiatives. And so scenario development will become the basis for the recommendations found in the final master plan. Next slide. So I just want to go over some of the high-level findings from phase 1 of the project with all of you. In particular, the findings from the market assessment portion of the research. There were 5 main takeaways from this, which I'll go into further detail. But number 1, freight in Chicago has been growing, but also volatile, particularly on the waterways, but the Port District has been able to grow consistently. Number 2, based on the commodity mix at the port, it's well positioned to capture future growth in freight traffic and in the region. Number 3, multimodal connectivity is the port's greatest asset, which will not surprise many people. Number 4, there are also opportunities for the port that go beyond freight within its 1,800 acres, and we've explored some of those. And finally, environmental remediation and conservation will continue to be a focus of efforts both at the port and throughout the southeast side. Next slide. So the Port District has held onto or grown freight volumes during what's been a very volatile decade. While overall Illinois waterway volumes have decreased since their peaks of the mid-90s, and a smaller peak during the Great Recession. The port has been somewhat shielded from recent losses in traffic due to its location and commodity mix. The port did experience a significant drop in waterborne tonnage in 2012, but some of this loss was recovered through increases in truck and rail traffic. And since then, waterborne tonnage has continued to increase. The port has been able to retain and even grow traffic levels, while regional waterway traffic has decreased, as you can see in the slide here. Also worth noting, IDOT projects that the highest growth in waterway tonnage in the state to be centered around Cook County. At the same time, the Port District has continued to hold on to its rail and truck-related traffic, meaning that total traffic levels in 2017 had mostly regained their 2011 values. Next slide. So the port handles commodities that are expected to grow in the Chicago region. Trends in growing demand for construction materials, grain shipments, and other commodities are aligned with the commodities that are currently handled by the port. And so the port is well positioned to take advantage of these growing markets, since it currently handles a substantial amount of construction products, such as lumber, steel, and aggregates, and has historically handled grain and other agricultural commodities. Chemicals and allied products, another regional growth area, is also an opportunity for the port. In addition to petroleum and energy products, which are currently handled at the port could take on additional chemical products manufacturing due to existing industrial infrastructure, multimodal connectivity, and existing land use and zoning. Just on this slide, point out where you see some of the growth in those materials that we're talking about. Next slide. As mentioned before, so connectivity is what, in our finding, we really found as the port's biggest asset. Its location provides shippers with access to 6 of the 7 Class 1 railroads, which is the only port in the country with that sort of connectivity, as well as the short lines. The interstate highways, including 94, 80, 57, 90, and 55, are all easily accessible, as well as downtown Chicago. The Chicago area waterway system provides a navigable connection to both the Mississippi River system, as well as the Great Lakes system. And although the Port District is in competition with other industrial properties along the Illinois River, such as Lamont and Joliet, its location and its multimodal connectivity provide really a strong competitive advantage. So according to regional freight projections, regional volumes across all modes are expected to grow by an average of 1.7% per year. And by 2050, freight volumes transported throughout Cook County are expected to grow to total 1.3 billion tons. So the port's multimodal connections makes it well positioned to capture growth in both rail and water traffic, as well as potentially the development of a truck staging or parking facility and or other type of container storage to support that regional freight activities and regional freight growth. Next slide. So as a part of this, I wanted to walk through some of the freight-specific opportunities and challenges that we're seeing at the port, both currently and into the future. So currently, there's booming development in the Calumet in both manufacturing and industrial spaces. The port's multimodal access allows for competitive pricing and supply chain resiliency to potential users, and it has available land and is doing foundational activities such as this plan, the ERIC initiative from the Port District, as well as others, to build broader support of its mission. Into the future, like we discussed, there's projected growth in the commodities that the Port District handles that be well positioned to capture and align with regional initiatives and ongoing community development in the Calumet area. Other opportunities include adaptive reuse, peer learning from other ports, and then continuing to build partnerships and transparency. Next slide. to then step through some of the challenges. Looking there, currently there are some significant infrastructure needs at the port, which come out of a number of factors, including the need for sustainable funding, investment from the public sector, and some structural issues regarding leasing activities, amongst others. Community concerns with activities at the port and ongoing environmental needs throughout the Southeast side also present further challenges. But looking to the future, inadequate infrastructure could hamstring the port from realizing its potential future growth. And that's part of the reason why that sort of investment is so crucial. And this plan is so crucial. The need for funding of this future project is high, and the port has strong regional competition to compete with, and it may suffer from a first mover disadvantage in some of those growth areas. Next slide.
Daniel, can I ask a question a second?
Sure.
You haven't mentioned any of the marine network challenges. So one of the challenges that you noted back in 2012, you might remember we were in a significant drought, and the water levels on the Great Lakes, as well as the water levels on the inland waterway system, were significantly low, which resulted in the fact that many of the marine vessels coming to and from the port either had to lighten their load or they weren't able to get in and out. The other thing that you haven't mentioned is, and at that same time on the inland waterway in 2012, for a very brief period of time, the waterway in front of Memphis was closed due to the fact that they didn't have 9 feet. And I think that recognizing that water levels, and I'll go back to Lake Michigan, we are now in one of the highest water levels of the lake that we've had. And we've seen dramatic shift between low water and high water in a period of less than 10 years, which has dramatic impact on the users of the port from the Lake Michigan side, as well as the fact that you're probably pretty familiar with the lack of investment in our locks and dams and the closure of the river and the inland waterway. I think adding those elements in your challenges, these are risks that the port has, and we can't impact the water level. And I think it also is important to recognize that the port connects to a marine network, that the investment in the entire network needs to be made in order to benefit all the nodes on that network, which IIPD is.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And thanks for that feedback. Yeah, be sure to make a note of that and make sure we're considering them. Great. So jump back in. So looking to the future beyond freight, there's strong regional support for non-industrial uses, provides additional opportunities at the port. So its size and position in the Calumet provide opportunities for a variety of commercial, recreational, environmental, and other non-industrial uses. Ongoing initiatives and activities, including the port's ERIC initiative, this master plan, and planning for a future multi-use path across Lake Calumet. Foundational activities that set the stage for further non-freight development and can begin the work for creating a more attractive space to attract larger projects. Next slide. And I'll just go kind of real high level on this side. So environmental remediation and conservation. The considerations we're looking at, they really kind of fall into 4 buckets. Number 1 being water quality, remediation, the Calumet supercluster, which while not being on the port district's property, does have significant impacts to the port and what can be done. And then finally, and that speaks somewhat to your point, in the pieces that we can control, is the dredging of the harbor and the use of fill materials and the various impacts of that. Next slide. Thanks. So then looking to the future, I just wanted to go over at a very high level potential uses being considered for the port as a part of a master plan on the freight side. So the port is and will continue to function as a multimodal port in the heart of Chicago. The port is one of the largest ports in the state by tonnage, and the state's only deep water port capable of handling vessels traveling across the Atlantic Ocean and through the Great Lakes. Kind of running through some of these potential uses. So looking towards distribution and e-commerce, there has been an Amazon distribution center moving into Pullman, and there certainly could be this could be a potential use of the port as well. There's a high level of competition in the area for these uses, both at a couple sites known as Avenue O and Pullman Crossings. And the port doesn't currently handle secondary traffic like this. However, the land is available. It's close to the city center, and it would lower vehicles miles traveled for potential users. However, of course, it can also have an impact on the surrounding neighborhoods and road conditions, which is something to consider. Stepping forward, alternative energy. So there's already a community solar project underway at the Port District. And there are, this is a potential use for what would be considered, contaminated sites. Solar panels, putting them above, form of potentially a solar farm. I've also explored wind turbines and storage for shipping wind turbines, as well as biofuels. Calling back to what we talked about a bit before in terms of commodities, the construction materials, raw and bulk commodities are expected to grow. The port's seeing growth in this area, and there's an opportunity to increase this activity at Iroquois Landing with investment. And specifically, we're looking at lumber, non-metallic materials, construction steel, and other bulk materials. Truck staging and container storage both serves a regional need, and it's a potential activity for the port to consider. This has been done successfully at other port districts around North America, and would not require a lot of investment. Forward, chemicals and petroleum, of course, is a historical use on the southeast side, and has become, pretty volatile. Obviously, right now, currently centered around the BP in Whiting, Indiana. Refinery capacity in the area grew significantly in the early 2010s due to the tar sand developments and the pipelines. And so, in part, the future gains are limited because the capacity's been met. And it does, of course, have significant environmental impacts and ongoing community opposition to this sort of use. Looking towards manufacturing, kind of three specific sectors that we're looking at are the steel supply chain, food manufacturing and production, and then components for transportation manufacturing, which would be tied fairly closely to the port plant nearby. And then finally, looking at agriculture, there is strong competition from other ports, both in Illinois and in the Midwest, who focus exclusively on agriculture. But there might be some opportunity to grow this activity. The port also does work with USAID right now, shipping food aid across the world, and that could be expanded, as well as looking at potential for a cold storage facility for agricultural users.
Did you talk about the peer ports that you looked at in terms of benchmarking and who they were, which ones you selected?
Sure. So the three that really we looked at in depth were Burns Harbor in Indiana, the Port of Cleveland, and the Port of St. Louis. There was a wider group that was considered. I think there were about 10 in that original grouping. The report itself, which is kind of going through the final editing process right now, looks at those three in particular, and then tries to draw, what are some best practices that can be applied here, as well as, the lessons learned and things like that. So looking forward to next steps. Phase 2 of the project is beginning now. And so we'll be developing 3 alternative features in the scenario process. Those will be evaluated by the project team, the Port District itself, the steering committee, as well as the general public. Coming out of that will be the development of a preferred alternative, which will then become the guide for the master plan. And just finally, the project's on schedule to be completed by the end of Q1 2021. And yeah, that's all I have. I'm happy to take questions. I do want to make a plug before I end for the State of the Port address that Clayton will be making this week. Clayton, that is on Thursday, correct? Thursday morning?
Correct, 24th.
Thursday the 24th. So if you wanted to learn more about the port itself and what's happening there, that is a great event. I didn't want to leave that out.
Excellent presentation. Clayton, do you have, since this is your baby, do you have any additional, thoughts that you'd like to share about how this process has gone so far and specifically the input that would be valuable from committee members and the public?
Thanks, and I apologize. We've got a virtual meeting, the AAPA going on. There's a lot of storm discussion. So I got that going. As soon as this is done, I'm gonna jump off. But what I would say is, Dustin hit the high points. We had a steering committee meeting last week. It's moving. Things are moving on fairly well, I believe. Obviously, the devil's going to be in the details, and then what the ultimate product is that comes forward. To the question, I am pleased with the way things are going. I think that I've been challenging folks along the way. I think that committees like this are important. So things like Libby mentioned, to refocus kind of what we're looking at, what we're thinking about, so that's at least included in the thought process is very much coveted. We want that. We need that. This is going to be, or it's intended to be, a living document. So it's not going to be the end all to be all, but it's certainly going to be the direction in which the port moves forward. I think one of our other issues is, while this is being put together, we're still moving forward. So there are moving parts while we're doing this moving document, and it's incorporating that. But I think that where we are right now and the direction in which it's going it is right. And I'd love to hear some feedback and respond to anyone here, or if anyone ever wants to send me some email or whatnot, you're absolutely free to do it. But I think CMAP leading the team is working out the best that it possibly could.
We'll open it up to committee members if they have any questions for Clayton or Dustin. I guess one of my questions that I'll pose for both of you, as you've looked at historical numbers, and then obviously this is a master plan, future projections of what the world of freight for the port is going to look like. Were there, how did you identify what those future needs are, both in terms of volume potential that you could capture, along with the commodity groups, that you identified? Are those existing clusters that you want to become, more focused on, or is that based upon feedback that you've received through questionnaires throughout the region? What kind of, could you give some context to that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say it's all of the above. Part of it is, looking at existing data and where we've been, and looking at, again, kind of peer ports and where IIPD stacks up in certain areas. The consulting team can speak more to some of the nitty gritty of the market analysis piece in particular, but that takes a look at both, existing conditions, then the trends within the different commodities and freight as a whole through the ports, and then in part, where do we want to go? Really, this first part of the project was really fact finding. So another big part of that was talking with different users and different stakeholders around the port, and getting a sense of where those priorities for the port district as a whole should be moving towards as we look to move into phase 2 and looking towards the master plan.
And the one thing I would add to that, I think Dustin is 100% correct, is we're looking at priorities. We're aligning them with opportunities. We're looking at some of the things that we desire to be too. So some of those discussion points are coming through, like the desire to connect gateway to gateway, be it Memphis, New Orleans, be it Gulf ports, Plaquemines. It depends on different opportunities that are available when you talk maritime, and then different opportunities that may be available that are unique or novel as it pertains to road or rail. Some of these things, there's not anything new out there to grab a hold of, but we're also challenging the thought process on what is a commodity. So looking at for instance, containers as a commodity, and trying to look at how we can move more of those, or if it even makes sense, looking at bringing, if it makes sense to have a reinvestment of grain or agriculture at the port and how that looks. And, the goals have been certain gateways. New Orleans is an easy one. Some of the East and West Coast ports are easier ones, but now it's looking maybe at some intermediate steps. So maybe instead of going all the way down to Memphis, all the way down to New Orleans, we're looking at Memphis. Maybe instead of going all the way to the West Coast, we're looking at, midway points. Maybe we're stopping in Colorado, or maybe we're going through Georgia, to Georgia, as opposed to Florida, Virginia, or New York. So it's just trying to see what's there in the studies. We're the beneficiary of the port of other studies that are going on at this time. We're working with the University of Chicago. Now, some of these studies are dictated by what they're trying to get out of there, but we can utilize them also to see what may be beneficial with the port as well. So just trying to be as nimble as possible and to see as many different things that make sense back in. And that's what they're taking in and digesting through this process.
Earlier this year, the COVID crisis halted several of the, if you think about these smaller cruise ships that are on the Great Lakes, they were supposed to launch in early 2020, but they basically have been held up for a year because of COVID. Are there any plans to look at the passenger cruise lines that are going to be transitioning the Great Lakes? I know there's some that are looking at Duluth, and they're the Viking style. So it's not a large, 2,000 people cruise. It's more like the 200 people kind of cruise ships.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something, and Clayton, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I guess there's 5 cruise ships that dock regularly at Iroquois Landing. Is that correct?
They did. That was one of the issues always, even before COVID, was them docking. It was the administration, whether they were docking here or the reason they were docking at the port was because they had issues at Navy Pier. So I always felt like as soon as they worked that out, they were going to be gone. So that wasn't anything that we could and or should rely upon. they have started to work out what their issues are at Navy Pier, and I would suspect that with there being more growth of the cruise line industry back on the Great Lakes, that they're going to focus more on downtown. And until we have another draw at the port, if one even ever comes, i.e. the casino, I would not expect or suspect that cruises would ever return back to the IIPD at this time.
Yeah, it's something it's been a consideration. It's certainly been a part of our research, but yeah, it's quite the step.
We had a question in the chat box. Was the port identified as a potential destination for a Hyperloop freight terminal? Is that idea considered in the plan?
So I haven't been on the project through the entire thing. I don't remember that coming up, but that's an interesting thought, Clayton. I don't think
it has never come up, and I think that we would absolutely consider it for sure.
Ryan, committee members, any additional questions before we move on?
There are no other questions in the chat box.
Okay. Well, Clayton and Dustin, thank you very much for a very informative discussion, and we'll be interested to see the progress of the master plan. And if you need any additional input from the committee or the public through this forum, we welcome a future update on that. So thank you. Now moving
Thank you all.
over.
of course, thanks everyone.
I have to jump off. I apologize, but please excuse me.
Thank you, Clayton. So now moving over, we'll go to our next discussion, which is the Western Will County Truck Routing and Community Study update by Jackie Henriksen and two CMAP alum, Jackie Murdoch and Alex Beata. So with that, if you want to take it over, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I'm Jackie Henriksen, and I'm a senior planner at Civil Tech. And Civil Tech is the lead consulting firm on the overall Moving Will County project, and we're tasked with melding together the efforts across both a truck routing study and a land use strategy. Also here presenting are Jackie Murdoch and Alex Beata with CDM Smith, and they are the lead in the truck routing portion of this project. And we're also partnering with the Lakota Group for community engagement, Ginkgo Planning and Design for the land use strategy, and Valerie Kretschmer Associates for the market study and impacts assessment. We're working with Patty Mangano, the truck routing lead, and Stephen Ostrander, the land use lead. And then our three primary contacts from Will County are Nick Palmer, the Executive Chief of Staff, and Denise Winfrey, the Will County Executive, and Ann Schneider, a transportation consultant to Will County. So in this presentation, we'll provide a brief overview of the overall Moving Will County project and give you an update on where we're at specifically with the truck routing study so far, including highlighting key corridor recommendations and next steps. And the next one, please. Great. First, to provide some context, the Moving Will County project consists of a land use strategy and a truck routing study. Both studies have different but overlapping boundaries and are being completed in tandem because the truck routing network has a critical tie-in with land use and vice versa. The land use strategy area is more concentrated and focused to the south, as this part of the county has surfaced in recent years as a core place where there are many natural resources as well as trucking destinations. And then the trucking study limits extend farther out to tie into major expressways and promote better east-west as well as north-south access and continuity. So in this presentation, we are going to focus on the truck routing study area, which is the red boundary, where we develop the draft truck routing network. We are concurrently developing land use recommendations that will be presented to the project steering committee in late October, and also later through another round of community engagement in early winter. Next slide, please. So with this project, we are looking to build on recommendations from the Will County Community Friendly Freight Mobility Plan, as well as on 225th, to maintain the region's status as North America's freight hub, while also balancing community concerns and the economic benefits of freight. We are tasked with developing a plan for an improved truck route network, which will help identify future transportation capital improvements. And we are also looking at ways or strategies to minimize or avoid the impacts of freight, as there are a lot of important cultural and environmental resources to protect in Will County. So the end goal is to provide guidance on strengthening our transportation system while improving the quality of life for communities, which will require a balanced approach between economic development and natural resource protection. Next slide. Here is the Moving Will County project timeline. The red dot shows where we are at in the process now. And as you can see, we are in the midst of the recommendation development phase. We kicked off the project about a year ago, in November of 2019, by speaking to community and agency leaders within the study area through a steering committee meeting. And we also conducted a robust analysis of existing conditions. During this phase, we did stakeholder interviews with key study area municipalities, the truck routing industry, as well as other agencies and stakeholders to understand their truck routing challenges and opportunities. And we also did the same for land use as well. From the data-driven analysis and stakeholder feedback, we drafted a draft truck routing network, which we'll show you today. We first previewed the draft network to all the study area municipalities for comment and the DOTs, and then we revised before a round of public engagement. And then with that revision, we brought it to the public through a virtual public workshop, poll, printed maps at key locations in the communities, emailed and voicemail comments, and an online interactive map. So the public commenting period just ended, and we're now in the midst of revising the network, and we'll post these revisions to the project website in mid-October. And we're also in the process of developing draft land use scenarios as part of the land use strategy, which utilize the draft truck route network. We will share these with the steering committee at the end of October, and we'll have another land use focused public involvement period in early December. The truck routing study is due to wrap up this coming spring, and the overall project is scheduled to finish in September 2021, and we're aiming for communities to either adopt or incorporate the plan into their policies the following month. So throughout the project timeline, we will be listening, collecting, and reviewing feedback. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, one of the first steps was conducting an existing conditions analysis for both truck routing and land use, which included a combination of technical data and the stakeholder interviews. These reports provide a lot of information and can be found on the project website. And we conducted both existing conditions analyses at the same time to highlight key findings between the studies and share data resources. So now I will hand it over to Jackie Murdoch to give a more specific overview of the data we looked at in the existing conditions analysis and how this data informed truck routing. Next slide, please.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. We've got back-to-back Jackies here. Hello all, Jackie Murdoch here. Happy to be back in front of the CMAP Freight Committee. And I'm now with CDM Smith, formerly of CMAP, and I'm the planning discipline leader over here at CDM. And I just wanted to go through a couple of our existing conditions, kind of greatest hits, and tee up our draft, recommendations for truck routes. But before I dive in, I wanted to just give an overall picture of what we're aiming to do here. And I know Patty had come in front of you all earlier to discuss the scope of this study. Right now, you're going to see existing condition slides. You're going to see sort of a map and potential truck routes. But really, the truck route network is just one piece of the puzzle that we're working through here in terms of the recommendations that'll come out of this plan. So in addition to identifying the routes, which is, a very tangible piece, you see the lines on the map, and it's all about creating an interconnected truck route map that, connects land use development patterns and known, origins and destinations for truck movement in Western Will County. We're also developing guidance for local communities and designating a truck route with IDOT. That's been a very commonly heard need, is to just provide sort of that go-by for how local communities go through the designation process. We're also developing guidance on how that filters in then to truck navigation platforms. And one of the more exciting things will be to develop an investment plan and program of projects for funding out of this map. So sort of once we have that interconnected truck route system codified, we're going to be looking at potential projects to tee up as a part of that investment plan. And I'll let Alex, when I pass it over to him, talk about more detailed strategies that will come out of this. So with that, I'm going to run over a couple of our greatest hits for existing conditions. If you could go to our next slide. So this is our truck count map, and this is heavy commercial vehicle counts in 2018 across the Western Will County study area. As many of you know, there is a lot going on 55 and 80, and that's reflected here. You see about, the interstate facilities are carrying about 10,000 trucks or more daily in 2018, with the highest volumes experienced on I-80 and I-55 north of I-80. So again, that, reflecting that intermodal activity. You also see a lot of our major arterial facilities like Weber Road and portions of Illinois 53, Illinois 7, US 6, and 30, and 52 carrying about 1,000 to 5,000 trucks a day. And there's one segment of Illinois 53 and Chicago Street just north of I-80 that carries 5,000 trucks a day. And again, this is from 2018, so it doesn't, if you're familiar with this area, there's a lot of land use changes going on. So this doesn't, reflect the latest and greatest, beyond 2018. Next slide. Truck congestion. So this was an interesting snapshot for us. So what this is looking at is hours of congestion experienced by trucks on the roadway, on roadways in the study area, again in 2018. You'll see that I-80 and 55, a lot of that isn't really popping up here. And what this really highlights is arterial congestion, again, because it's based on hours of congestion experienced by trucks. So where the largest truck bottlenecks are on the arterial system, including key corridors like, again, Weber Road. We see again here popping up Illinois 53 near I-55, areas in Lockport on Illinois 7, Larkin Ave, so some, again, like local arterial network congestion, and Illinois 59 and Plainfield. So even though we see the interstate facilities are registering less congestion by this measure, that congestion is obviously experienced by far more trucks given the higher volumes, on 80 and 55. So going to the next one here. Next slide, please. Is truck crashes. Of course, safety is a key concern, the highest concern for members of the public, transportation agencies, and trucking firms alike. So we did update this truck crash hotspot map, which takes into account a 5-year rolling average of truck crashes between 2014 and 2018. And there were over 400 truck and bulk crashes in the study area. Major crash hotspots occurred in places that you would generally expect to see, right, along the interstate system where truck volumes are highest. So, you see that area all in along Joliet, I-55 in the northern part of the study area, and the I-55 on I-80 interchange. That's that big sort of agglomeration right in the middle there. Were major hotspots for trucks. But you also see key interchanges with arterials that are major hotspots as well. And chief among those were the I-80 and Illinois 53 interchange near downtown Joliet, and the US 30 and I-55 interchange. And then off the expressway system, truck crashes were concentrated maybe, expectedly so, near the intermodal district in Elwood and Joliet, as well as the downtown Plainfield area. Next slide. Changes in law for designated truck routes. This, I know Tom Murtha came to you guys about the change in law for designated truck routes, and this really has affected how we've had to message and communicate and look at truck routes since it came online, when we were conducting this study. So it took effect as of January 1st, 2020, and again, sort of changes the mechanisms, I would say, for how we look at truck routes. So in broad terms, the new law currently allows trucks up to 65 feet in length to travel on all roadways, unless that roadway is restricted to truck traffic and a sign is posted. So previously, the former law permitted truck length of 55 feet. So it basically said, instead of 55-foot trucks allowed everywhere, now you get 65-foot trucks that are allowed on all roadways, again, unless you restrict that roadway. Trucks longer than 65 feet may travel on designated truck routes, as well as in general a 5-mile buffer of a designated truck route in order to make a pickup delivery or food, fuel, rest, or repair. So again, this is an important thing to message and to communicate in terms of how we look at the role of designating truck routes. And to me, the takeaway is designated truck routes is still of vital importance to indicate an investment on certain arterials and interstate system. It also highlights the importance. I think it makes the route restrictions a stronger tool for local communities if they do want to restrict access for trucks. So it sort of strengthens that tool that local communities have. So I'm going to pass it over to Alex, where he will talk about our draft network and key recommendations for designating truck routes and highlight some key arterial roads that we zoomed in on in the latest round of public meetings. So with that, I'll hand it over to Alex.
All right, thank you. And Brian, if I could ask you to move the slide forward, thank you. Like Jackie, it's great to be in front of the Freight Committee again. It's been a bit of a hiatus, but wonderful to see so many familiar names there on the roster. So to pick up with this slide, and again, as Jackie Henriksen mentioned, our original motivation in many ways comes from the Will County Community Friendly Freight Mobility Plan, which noted that the area would benefit from a cohesive and interconnected truck route network. Doing so ensures that trucks travel on appropriate facilities and promote safety and quality of life for local communities. Our goal in our draft recommendations map was to identify a network of Class 2 designated truck routes that connects the major origins and destinations of truck trips, such as the intermodal yards and major industrial areas, to the arterial system and the expressway network. And as Jackie mentioned on the previous slide, there are two classes, Class 1 and Class 2 designated truck routes. The impact on the permitted length of trucks is the same. The difference is largely that Class 1 refers to the expressway network, while Class 2 refers to the arterial network, and the latter is the focus of our study. Taking that focus ensures lawful access for large trucks that are critical to economic activity, not only in Will County, but in the larger CMAP region. In addition, Class 2 designated truck routes are reported to and published in IDOT's statewide map, which truck navigation providers use as input data. In short, taking the approach of proactively identifying Class 2 truck routes provides a very clear way for communities to indicate to the trucking industry where they prefer trucks to travel. And to just reiterate the note that the truck route network that we're talking about in today's presentation is just one piece of that larger truck routing study, which will take into account other more policy-oriented recommendations to improve safety and better integrate trucks into local communities. To move now to the next slide, here we see a map of our draft truck routing recommendations. This work was based on the truck performance data from the existing conditions research, which you heard a little bit about a few moments ago, as well as a detailed review of nearby land uses and coordination with local public agencies, industry groups, and environmental stakeholders. We look forward to continuing to refine this map based on the public comment that we've received over the past several weeks, and that will be reflected in a final map in a few weeks' time. Overall, the draft map builds on the existing Class 1 and 2 designated truck route network to identify new routes along key arterials and local roadways serving major industrial districts. Here we have two suggested categories to truck routes, short-term and long-term Class 2 routes. We believe that short-term routes could be designated by highway agencies within the next 5 years with little or no additional capital investment. These are generally existing facilities that already carry truck traffic or new facilities that are near to construction phases and designed to accommodate a high volume of trucks. Long-term routes could be designated by highway agencies beyond the next 5 years. These facilities include planned roadways that require additional project development before construction, or planned projects rather, facilities that may require more substantial capital investment, or new facilities that may be warranted as truck routes if future land use patterns result in more truck traffic in the area. We're moving now to the next two slides, which zoom in respectively to the northern and southern portions of the study area to highlight some of the major corridors. Here in the northern portion of the study area, the recommended truck routes include roads that serve existing major industrial districts, such as those in Bolingbrook and Romeoville, as well as major facilities like Weber Road, US 52 or Jefferson Street in Joliet, and US 6 or Maple Road, also in Joliet. These facilities connect industrial districts to each other and also to the interstate system. The map here also includes proposals to reduce conflicts that high truck volumes present in historic downtown areas, such as those in Plainfield and in Lockport. To take Plainfield, for example, you may see just above the Plainfield label a long-term Class 2 truck route recommendation between Illinois 59 and I-55. And this reflects planned improvements by the village to build a new facility which would extend 143rd Street to complete that triangle, so to speak, giving trucks an alternate way to access an industrial district off of US 30 without first passing through downtown Plainfield. And that project has a second future component that would continue the extension of 143rd Street towards I-55 and a new planned interchange a bit to the south. Aside from these few highlights, most of the other recommendations in the northern portion of the study area are short-term Class 2 truck route recommendations. This portion of the county has more mature development patterns. Many of the O's and D's, so to speak, are well established, and many local roadways within industrial districts already handle high volumes of truck traffic today. Moving now to the next slide, focusing on the southern portion of the study area. Here we have a number of short-term Class 2 recommendations along local roads that serve the Joliet Elwood Intermodal District, as well as existing legacy industrial areas in Rockdale, Channahon, and elsewhere. This part of the study area also has the greatest potential for land use change, which would require new truck routes in the future. In particular, a key need in this part of the study area is additional east-west connections to support longer distance movements. So to that end, you see, for example, a long-term Class 2 recommendation along Wilmington-Piatone Road near the southern portion of the study area. This is consistent with an On-to 2050 regionally significant project. You also see a long-term Class 2 recommended to the west and south of the village of Manhattan. This would serve as something of a bypass to provide an alternate route for trucks to avoid conflicts in the historic downtown area and schools as well in the village. That, of course, would take additional effort to scope more fully, but that's an idea we heard from local stakeholders. And as I mentioned, there are other east-west connections included on the map here, such as Schweitzer Road, Manhattan Road, and so forth. So to move now to the next slide, just a little bit of discussion, and we won't have time today to go into the level of detail that we've used for other engagement opportunities. But in our draft truck route recommendations maps, we acknowledge that for many corridors in the study area, difficult trade-offs must be considered and difficult decisions made. And to that end, we identified 8 corridors, which will be highlighted on the next map. And we've centered some of our public engagement to date along these 8 corridors. And those were identified because of the potential for significant land use change adjacent to these corridors, because of differing opinions that we've heard from local agencies and organizations on the preferred long-term treatment of these corridors, and as well because they pass through a varied context of land uses today as well. So those include many of these east-west corridors that I mentioned briefly earlier, such as Manhattan or Schweitzer, Wilmington Peatone, but also Lairway Road out to the north. They include Jefferson Street and Maple Road in the more developed portion of Joliet, north of I-80. They also include Briggs Road as a connection between US 52 and I-80 in the southeast corner of Joliet and just beyond. So we've heard quite a bit of public feedback already to date on some of these corridors, and we'll take that into consideration as we make our final revisions to the map. In other engagement efforts, we've had the opportunity to go through each of those corridors one by one and talk about the pros and cons and challenges of each, and even do some live straw poll voting, but in the interest of time, we won't be able to go through that exercise today. So the next few slides, I believe we'll go through those, and here we can skip straight to the engagement to wrap it up, and I believe that we'll go back to Jackie Henriksen to talk about next steps, not only for the truck routing plan, but also the larger land use and truck routing plans together.
Sure. Thank you, Alex. So as Alex mentioned, we have been gathering feedback on these truck routing network. And through both the virtual public workshop, but we also had the polling questions available on the project website, along with a recording of the presentation for those who missed it, so they could take it after. And we also had the whole truck route network that you saw on an online interactive map using Wikimap. So, so participants could go to that link, they could zoom in, pan around, and take a little mini survey directly on the map and put down comments about sensitive areas to avoid as well, such as schools and residential areas. In addition to that, we did have some non-online ways for people to engage. So we had printed maps available at these different locations around the study area. And we also had the availability for people to call a voicemail system and leave a comment that way. Or they also emailed us comments as well. We got a lot of those. So now we are revising the network. We are using this draft network to also, as one of the pieces in our land use scenarios for the land use strategy, which we are in the midst of developing right now. So those scenarios will build upon, excuse me. So those will build upon if these draft truck route network were within the scenario focus areas, different sorts of land use scenarios, how that could look, the potential impacts. So we are looking at that now, and we are going to have a third steering committee in late October in which we'll unveil those. And then we'll have another round of community engagement focused on those land use scenarios in early December. So I think that is all we have for now, but we are happy to take questions or comments. And we also, if you have any specific questions on those 8 corridors that Alex flashed, we have slides for those as well, so we can talk on those. It looks like we had a comment box from Don Loper. Will your network result in potential changes to truck routing in adjacent communities? I guess would that be, okay, so that would be adjacent communities outside of the study area? Is that the idea behind the question?
The question was really about adjacent counties, not communities.
Oh, okay, sorry.
And I would say the short answer is most likely no. Most of our deliberation is focused on local roadways and arterials within the core of the study area. To the extent that the truck movements go beyond the study area, those movements would largely occur on existing Class 1 and Class 2 roadways. So that would be my off-the-cuff reaction.
Alex, are you all proposing design standards for some of the corridors that you will recommend ultimately? I mean, I assume that a lot of the Will County routes are maybe 2-lane or 4-lane unimproved roadways, local roadways. That's, and is there going to be, some work with pavement design involved with that?
So most of our effort today has been focused, of course, on pinning down the map itself. And as Jackie mentioned earlier, the other components of this portion of the study allow for a recommended capital improvement plan. And as part of that, there could be some room for conceptual level sketches of cross sections and things like that. So I think that's the level of detail we'll be able to get into.
Yeah, there'll also be, as part of the land use strategy, we'll be looking at the truck routes that go through the scenario focus areas and looking at, from the conceptual planning level, best practices in designing different sorts of roadways through the varying land use contexts. So we'll be looking at that for that project as well. So yeah, in general, we're looking at how to minimize impacts to freight on the sensitive land uses, improving safety. Some other pieces would be potential solutions for truck parking, and strategies to preserve and enhance community livability. And then also identifying signage wayfinding improvements to keep trucks on the appropriate roadways.
Has any thought been made to look at creating resiliency and redundancy to being able to access the logistics park? Because right now everything comes in off of Baseline Road, right? And so if, say, for example, something happened like the bridge collapsed, which I don't know that it would, but, or that there is a fatal accident that closes, both north and southbound I-55 getting in and out of the terminal. Is there any thought or any sort of evaluation looking at how you might be able to create resiliency or redundancy by creating a second access point?
This is Jackie. I'll just handle this at a high level. No, we haven't done any formal exercise in terms of like hazard mitigation or anything like that, or sort of scenario exercises with any traffic flow. I would just offer, I guess, that Hobart Bridge is meant to serve as another access point to the intermodal yard, and that is assumed in the planning process for the study.
And what's the time horizon for that?
Oh, geez, for Hobart,
Yeah.
I'm going to defer to someone else who might know more specifics to that. Alex, I don't know if you know when it's going to come online.
I don't have the detailed schedule at my fingertips, but the first components of it, which I believe are the city's improvements to the existing portion near the I-80 interchange, are going to construction pretty soon, maybe even within the next year. So it's included as short-term recommendation in our map to be completed within the next 5 years.
A question about the draft map that you provided. You mentioned that some of the truck routes, particularly class 2, are particularly useful for arterial streets, but looking at the map you showed us, and it's hard when it's zoomed out and the lines are thicker to show it, but it looked like some of the industrial corridors had a lot of the interior roads designated as becoming class 2 truck routes. Is that the plan to move that forward through the plan, or is it just going to be sort of at that higher arterial level with the idea that the trucks can access these industrial last quarter mile segments of the industrial roads off these class 2 truck routes?
So the intent is to keep not only the arterial but also those local first last mile and interior type roadways to the extent that they're public jurisdiction. And the idea is to have the benefit of a formal class 2 designation really from start to finish for a truck trip, or at least the portion of a truck trip occurring within the study area. And that's similar in approach to the previous LTA project, which looked at truck routing in the O'Hare area. You could say that maybe that's more truck route designation than is required. As Jackie mentioned a few slides ago, there's that general 5-mile buffer that a truck is allowed to access non-designated roadways for the purpose of making a pickup or delivery, for example. And certainly those last quarter mile segments would be captured within that type of buffer. But we felt it was important to be as comprehensive as possible, and in part that's because class 2 routes ultimately are reported up to IDOT and published in a statewide truck route map, which is used by navigation providers to give directions to truckers. So that is part of the motivation to make sure the trucks go from A to B along the corridors that local communities prefer trucks to use. And it's also something of a longer term sort of planning signal to the industry that these are the types of roads where the communities want trucks to go and will commit to maintaining those roadways to an appropriate standard over time.
So on the sort of flip side of that coin, are there recommendations in the plan to designate truck restrictions? I know there was a road classification that said local roads that said either to limit or restrict trucks on these roads that are in mostly residential areas. Are you looking at that particularly around the industrial areas where people are more likely to complain about trucks rolling through their neighborhood?
Sure, no, it's a good question. And in the larger existing conditions report, we've documented the existing restrictions as pulled from local ordinances. And as you can imagine, local agencies or local municipalities take a range of approaches to adopt restrictions. They use weight-based restrictions, length-based restrictions, in turn different weights and different lengths, combinations of all the above. It's difficult to come up with comprehensive recommendations for restrictions in the same way that we can for routes. So you may have noticed just as we quickly went through those maps that we use a truck not preferred label for those types of facilities. So it's not a restriction or detailed recommendations about the tonnage and so forth. It's at a more conceptual level of, we just don't prefer trucks to use these, but at the end of the day, it'll be up to the local agency with jurisdiction to
I'm not sure if Alex broke out
decide
there.
whether to impose restrictions. We can include language and have done some research on the restriction process. Oh, did I? I'm sorry.
Oh, I don't know.
Not sure where I left off, but in summary, No, but in summary, we're taking a more conceptual level, trucks not preferred approach to address that issue, and are focusing our efforts on more proactively identifying the truck routes. But we've done a little research as well with IDOT on the truck restriction process and some of the requirements there, as well as some best practice recommendations. So that type of material will be included in the plan.
And I will just say anecdotally it's much, in terms of like focusing the resources, it's much more difficult to get consensus on where trucks, where they want designated truck routes, right? So it's much harder to do that consensus building around indicating where multiple municipalities along a corridor would want to indicate a truck route and indicate that level of investment. So just from like technical resources and sort of engagement aspect, that is a good place to sort of put the resources in identifying the potential truck routes in an area such as this, which is again constantly evolving. It's a little bit easier for folks to indicate where they don't want trucks to go. And I think the harder job is to indicate a continuous network for truck routes.
And the last thing I'll add is that for a few key corridors, we have heard very loud and clear from local stakeholders, they do not prefer trucks to use. So Hoff Road comes to mind immediately. It's the northern boundary of Medewan National Tallgrass Prairie towards the southern end of the study area. So that is an east-west corridor, and its future could be contested, but we've heard some very firm opinions as to the long-term outcome for that corridor.
Great. Thanks for the presentation. It's really great to see the work that's going into it. I'm a little selfishly asking these questions as Cook County is hopefully going to start their Southwest Cook trucking study soon. We should be kicking that off hopefully in, I think, November. So it's great to hear some of the strategies going into this, because obviously we want to look at the borders with this project as it relates to the sort of bordering Southwest Cook County and looking at recommendations you've all provided. So thanks again for going through that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving along on the agenda. Thank you very much for your discussion. Going to turn over to Tom Murtha for the next two items, the RFP for commercial services, vehicle model and survey, as well as COVID's impact to our regional transportation network. Tom, take it away.
Hi. Let's see, and I don't have slides for this presentation, but we have the actual our RFP posted on our website, and you can take a look at the RFP if you're interested, and address questions to the contact listed on the RFP itself. So this RFP is focused on commercial services vehicles. So examples of this include utilities, service, construction, retail home delivery, and package delivery. So it isn't the traditional, like kind of large scale freight commodities that we have worked on previous models, but this really fills a gap in our modeling system between, again, those commodity models and the passenger household trips that we've been modeling for decades. So the project goals include designing and conducting a commercial vehicle survey to collect information on non-freight commercial vehicle travel and activity, developing a commercial vehicle tour estimation process, and the results will be procedures to develop commercial services, service trips, both for the current situation as well as forecasting into the future. Tasks include data review, and there's a lot of data that we expect both to collect as well as to existing data that we can analyze. Survey design, development and execution, data processing, estimation and calibration of the model, and potentially what further updates and improvements are seen by the consultant team as necessary. So the responses are due on October 1st, and you know, again, we anticipate this filling a key gap in our travel model capabilities. And that's it for that presentation. Okay, and again, any questions can be addressed to the person listed on the RFP. The next thing that I'd like to discuss very briefly is some work that we've been doing since March to track the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'll be talking about various transportation impacts, but also focusing on freight in particular. Next slide, please. The first travel trend that I'd like to discuss is just our review of IDOT count station data. IDOT maintains a system of 24-hour counts that gives classification information, vehicle classification information for the system. We take that information, compare it to the results in March. There's a lot of missing data, so we have to make a lot of adjustments to the data to account for the missing data, and then weight it by the VMT for each class and roadway classification, each vehicle classification, roadway classification, to come up with these trends over time. So we saw in March that passenger vehicle travel dropped precipitously, and single unit truck travel dropped again in a range of 20–25% in those first weeks of the crisis. The multi-unit trucks, the combination trucks, didn't drop as far, but as the pandemic recovery began, we saw that the single unit truck volumes actually climbed to levels above what they were at the beginning of the pandemic, while combination truck volumes have generally leveled off over the past few months at about the pre-pandemic levels. So again, it appears that as an industry, the freight and while each firm will have different experiences, the overall the freight industry appears to have recovered in the volumes that they are dealing with, and in fact for the single unit trucks that may be doing increased in numbers of home deliveries and keeping stocks up to stores up to stock and so forth. Those volumes are actually higher than they were earlier. So next slide. Here we see rail volumes. So this data shows information of rail cars, carload volumes coming in to the Chicago terminal. These volumes were much slower to decline than the truck volumes, but the recovery has not been as complete for the rail system as it has for the trucking system. Nonetheless, there has been a recovery. We see that both the volume of cars en route to Chicago, as well as the cars processed within the Chicago terminal, are again going up compared to their April and May lows. One thing that we also keep track of is how long the carload volumes, carloads take to get through the Chicago terminal. We see here that the volumes, the increasing volumes from June and July had resulted in increased travel times through the Chicago terminal compared to pre-COVID times. So in excess of 32, 33 hours to get through the Chicago terminal compared to less than 30 before the pandemic. These excess travel times have in fact over the past several weeks started to go down again. So not only are the volumes approaching pre-pandemic levels, but also the performance of the system is also improving as the railroads adjust to the new realities. Next slide, please. And here we see some travel trends by the relative income. So this data indicates that again, a lot of the people who were involved in essential activities were people with lower than median incomes, and their travel did not fall as far as people with higher incomes, but over time, as the recovery has taken place, we see that this this disparity between higher and moderate incomes and lower incomes has somewhat abated. Next slide. And this slide shows some crash trends. This is limited to the city of Chicago, where we have good up-to-date information. Overall, for serious injuries, we see that as a result of probably as a result of the lower levels of travel, the serious injuries had declined through June, both for all crashes and specifically also we're tracking bicycle and pedestrian serious injuries. On the other hand, some other data that we've been tracking that's you can see on our website. The information wasn't up to date when the slides were due, but fatalities are actually somewhat higher now, looking at data through the end of August than they had been earlier in the pandemic. So serious injuries overall still lower for than they were in previous years. But on the other hand, fatalities have now bumped up above what they were for 2019. Next slide. And I think this is probably the last slide. One of the other things that we're tracking is our transit ridership, and overall the transit ridership has fallen substantially since the beginning of the pandemic, particularly for the metro rail system. So there has been some recovery in these volumes, but again, not approaching what they had been pre-pandemic. And I think, if I remember right, that's the last slide. If you can go to the next. If I'm happy to answer any questions about this information, and otherwise turn it back to Ryan.
I have a quick question. This is Joe calling from CDOT.
Yes.
I have to drop off after this as well because I have to get on another call, the same one as Herbert actually. But the one slide that you showed with the truck trends, you know, with this precipitous drop, and the fact that it showed that it actually was higher than pre-COVID.
Yes.
You know, my question would be whether or not, if you looked at previous years to do the cross-reference, if that's typical for that time of year, or was it playing catch-up for the time that it was inactive, that being the truck traffic?
Regrettably, it's a little bit hard to answer that with the information we've got now. There were some count stations that actually had substantial changes in volume prior to the COVID pandemic, which confounds any analysis trying to compare with previous years. So we weren't able to figure out the seasonality as you're asking, but it appears that given the differential trends in some of the classifications and the passenger vehicles and so forth, it looks like this is real. So that's my impression. That, you know, again, the single unit truck volumes have more than rebounded. But again, time will tell as we analyze more data as this unfolds.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you,
you,
everybody. They're all very nice presentations. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay. If there's no other questions for Tom, we can move on to the next item. Herbert had to step out, so I'll just take over for the remainder of the meeting. For this one, the last time this committee had met was back in February. And as you're all aware, a lot has happened in that time. So much has happened, and the pandemic has completely upended the way of life. And on top of that, issues relating to equity and justice have come to the national spotlight. For this agenda item, we just wanted to provide a space to reconnect and to share how our organizations have been navigating these challenging times. So my plan, we're running kind of low on time here, but my plan is just to kind of go down the attendee list to see if anybody has anything they'd like to share. I provided a list of discussion questions to help serve as a prompt, but by no means do you need to answer these specific questions. But if there's anything that you have to share specifically about how your organization has been impacted by the pandemic and what steps you've been taking to adapt to those challenges. And so with that, again, I just want to stress we are running low on time, so we could keep responses pretty brief, maybe like a minute or two. That would be great. I want to make sure we provide some time for public comment at the end. So with that, I'll just start going down the list. I know Joe just said he had to step out, so I'll move down to Elaine. Did you have anything you wanted to share?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I really have to share about council mayor's things is a lot of the other PLs and myself are taking a look at how our revenues are going to be impacting, municipal spending. And I think for that, we're just kind of in a holding pattern to see what the true financial and fiscal impacts of the pandemic are going to be. But, I have a couple of towns that are starting to be aware of how am I going to make sure I can afford my local match on a project and, certain things like that. So that's about the only impact that we've really seen. So.
Great, thank you. Mo?
Yeah, this is Garland Armstrong speaking. I just want to call to tell you that me and my wife at the end of, we're going to be leaving Illinois and moving to Des Moines, Iowa. And after all these years here, and we've done everything all we can, especially for the ADA, And it's like the lawmakers down there feels like they don't want to listen to us. And we just want y'all to know that we're moving on to Des Moines, Iowa, and then we'll be part of the committees there. And then we're going to make sure to bring these up and tell you what they're going to have for us. So we just want to thank y'all for everything, what we've done for y'all. And if you have any comments for the two of us, because before we leave at the end of next month, since we're saying so long Des Plaines, and we'll come back for a visit, but we'll be leaving at the end of next month. If anybody on the committees or anybody on the staff from CMAP want to say something to us before we go.
Yeah, thank you, Garland. I know we'll definitely record this down as part of public comment. And I know I'm relatively new to CMAP, but I've heard a lot about both your and Heather's participation in CMAP committees, and we greatly appreciate everything you've contributed. And my family is actually living in Des Moines. So while I know everybody's gonna be very sad to see you guys leave, I do know that Des Moines is great, and I hope you enjoy it there.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just gonna move back going down the list for committee members. So the next person would be Mike Carton from C&K Trucking.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Just a couple comments. Garland, congrats on the move. Really enjoyed all your comments throughout the last few years. So we'll miss those, and you'll have to come back and sit down on a meeting every once in a while. So, but from my perspective, I run a trucking and logistics company, and we do primarily intermodal, and we're pretty much across the country except for the West Coast. And what Tom was showing in his charts are very consistent with what we see in our trucking volumes. Obviously in February, March, April, volumes went down, and then volumes really picked up. And on the intermodal side, we're seeing volumes year over year higher than they were last year. So that may answer the question that the one gentleman had that got off the call, that we're year over year higher. And, we're seeing a tremendous amount of pressure to handle more and more volume in the Chicagoland market, and more volume than we have capacity. And I think most other truckers are feeling the same thing on the intermodal side. So I think we lost some supply of drivers over the last few months. Some of them took advantage of unemployment or some of the PPP incentives that were in place, and we haven't been able to get them back into the marketplace yet. I would guess that it's in Chicago about 5 to 10% of our drivers that we lost were related to getting paid elsewhere, and it just made better sense to sit on the bench than come out and play. So we're working on getting those drivers back and trying to push people along. From the COVID-19, we've all had to adjust to working at home, and we brought people into the office back slowly, and then we had one or two people potentially get COVID. So then we shut back down, and now we're slowly opening back up. And so we're just, the stress that we're facing is, having very high volumes, which we see for the next 2 months, and we don't see it slowing down, and being not as productive because we're not all able to work together as a team in one office. So that's creating some strains for us. So overall, I'm very supportive of CMAP and being involved. It really allows us, at least me personally, to get a much bigger perspective than my small niche and what we do overall and what's going on in the Chicagoland marketplace. So I enjoy these presentations and finding out what other projects are going on outside of my space. So from my perspective, I get a lot of value out of what we're doing, and appreciate your guys' support and efforts over the last couple of years.
Great, thank you. So Clayton had already said he had to step out, so I'll go down to Clark from the Illinois Chamber.
Hey guys, thanks for having me at this meeting. This is my first meeting I've been able to join, and I'm happy to be here. With less than 50 days left until election, that is dominating the focus and the agenda for the chamber. In particular, the defeat of the progressive income tax amendment so that we don't have a rush of small business owners and job creators following Garland out the door. Thanks for having me, and I can look forward to continue working with this committee.
Great, thank you, Clark. We're excited to have you with us. So moving on, it'll be Michael from FHWA.
Hey, Michael Kowalczyk, Federal Highway Illinois Division. Want to first say congrats to City of Joliet. I posted in the chat pod the link for their Build 2020 award. They received $20 million last week from Federal Highway and the US DOT for their Build 2020. So congrats on that. I think one of the big challenges between FHWA, IDOT, I also work with the CREATE partners, is virtual public meetings and virtual public involvement. I've sat in on multitude of different best practices throughout the country, and maybe CMAP as they kind of put together best practices can look into that if we stay in this virtual public involvement moving forward. Other things I'm focused on are obviously a new highway bill. FAST Act runs out September 30th, and see if it becomes a continuing resolution situation. But I guess everyone just continue to stay healthy, and that's all from me.
Great, thank you, Michael. Next, it'd be John Loper from DuPage DOT.
Good morning, everybody. I think the only thing that I have to report today is, just like many other communities, I think you mentioned this earlier, was that our MFT and local gas tax revenues have been flagging a little bit, in between 20 and 30% for the year. Things have picked up a little bit, which is a happy circumstance, but we're looking at kind of completing our long-range transportation plan very shortly, and in there we'll take a look at a variety of different potential financial scenarios as things move forward. But that's about it from us.
Great, thanks, John. So next we would have Libby Ogard.
Sure. So I don't know if all of you guys know, I'm a Illinois certified small business, woman-owned small business. And much like many people have mentioned before, what we see is the budget gaps for many of the contracting agencies are now lower in the average of 30%, some 40% below expectations, some less. And there's not a lot of work out there, as a lot of the larger firms have, if they don't have a DBE requirement, they don't bring small businesses on. And I guess what I would say or mention to this group is that the DBE procurement set-asides are really important for your small businesses. And we need those set-asides to remain in place and be actively enforced, because otherwise we are really the flea on the tail of the dog of progress, even though we think we can provide value added to any of the projects and any of the public studies that are going on. So make sure that you don't reduce your DBE requirements. That would be my message.
Great, thank you, Libby. So Herbert did have to step out, so we'll move on to Sam from Cook County.
Sure. So just a couple quick points for Cook County. I want to jump off what Libby just said and say that the county has, under President Preckwinkle, been a supporter of DBE on all of our projects, and with our countywide goal of having a larger share of DBE than is required or is usually given to at many other agencies across the country. So we're very committed to that as part of our equity initiative. Going off our equity lens, at least, the president just finished up her second racial equity week last week, where there were a few discussion topics. Part of it was a roundtable to talk about sort of the transportation initiatives that we have, and excuse me I have a new puppy. Our Racial Equity Week, we talked about a fair transit pilot that we have that we're trying to move forward with, and particularly now with the as Tom showed us, the drop in revenue with the transit agencies. We're looking at trying to help, particularly on the south side of Chicago and the south suburbs, how we can help with the have equitable transit services for everyone. Just final piece is that our MFT revenues also have fluxed over this time. Fortunately for us, when our fiscal year is, a lot of our MFT that we started receiving last year after the law was in place, we hadn't budgeted because we had just missed our 2020 budget season. So at least in terms of our current projects, we are looking to move forward and continue with any of our existing projects and our planned projects. We haven't removed any of them so far, and we're looking to through our Invest in Cook, which hopefully will be announced this Thursday, or other initiatives. We're looking to help out municipalities or other local agencies in Cook County who may need assistance during this time, at least in terms of their transportation projects. So yeah, a lot going on, obviously, but we're trying to still be here to help out as we can. Thanks.
Don't microwave.
Great. Well, thank you, Sam. And I think finally on my list, Eric Varela.
Thanks, Ryan. And welcome to the Chicago. I really don't have anything to update on.
Okay. Thank you.
The presentation was great.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So is there anybody that I missed, or is there anyone that would like to add anything else to the conversation before we move on? Okay. If not, thank you to everybody for reporting out. Certainly CMAP is continuously reassessing where our priorities lie, and specifically around what we can do to help with the COVID response, as well as promoting equity, inclusive growth in the region. So we really appreciate to hear what your organizations are working on and additional ways CMAP might be able to help support that work. So please feel free at any time to reach out to me if there's anything that you think CMAP might be able to do to help out with that. And thanks again for sharing. So with that, we'll move on. Is there any other business to share? And if not, we'll move on to public comment. I just have a brief thing I have to read here. We will now provide an opportunity for public comment. Please indicate your interest in making a comment to the Freight Committee or use the raise your hand feature and we can unmute you.
Just want to say thank you again, and this is Garland Armstrong, and my wife Heather would like to say thank y'all for everything, and then we hope we can see y'all. We hope we can see y'all again in the future down the road, and we'll explain how it is in Des Moines, Iowa, with their part of the committees, what we're going to be on, and then we'll bring it back to you, or we'll keep in contact too.
Great, thank you very much, Carl.
Yeah, this is Heather. I want to say thanks for everything. And when we come back to Chicago, we will tell you how everything went.
Excellent. Thank you, Heather.
My pleasure.
Is there anyone else who would like to provide public comment? Okay, hearing none. The next meeting will be December 7th, 2020 at 10 a.m. I have heard from several community members who are interested to know what the future meetings will consist of. So that'll definitely be a discussion item we'll have on the agenda to talk about 2021 work plan and the upcoming agendas for the committee. But if you have anything else that I have heard from a couple different staff at CMAP who have items that they would like to add on to the agenda. But if there is anything immediate that any of you need, let me know and we can talk about the potential of putting that on the agenda. But other than that, thank you very much for being here today. It was nice to have this first meeting with you as your liaison. And if there's nothing else, I think we can adjourn. Great. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Tom.
Goodbye.